managing priorities and communication, that's agility by definition. What's important? Why is it important? When is it important? And then you can keep triaging.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision.
Welcome to Status Go, the podcast exploring tech and innovation transformation. I'm your host, Jeff Ton. Today, we're diving into bimodal IT, navigating ambidexterity for innovation integration. Okay, now many of you thought, gee, Jeff Gartner talked about bimodal years ago. Isn't that the battle between legacy and cloud? If you did, you may be surprised by today's conversation. Bimodal is even more important in this age of digital. If you are being challenged to drive innovation in your organization, it is vitally important that you become ambidextrous. Today's guest is Nabil Badr. Nabil is the CTO for Medvantix, a medication management platform designed to help their partners achieve greater customer centricity while enabling a frictionless patient-provider experience. But he has also been studying IT organizations, specifically IT service organizations, for many years. In this world of relentless digital change, we're joined by Nabil, the author of Enabling Bimodal IT. His paper unveils the secrets to embracing innovation and agility, and we'll discuss how bimodal IT reframes IT's value, shares insights from case studies in IT service companies, and uncover practical strategies for fostering ambidexterity. Whether you are in an IT services company or not, get ready to learn how your IT organization can lead business model innovation, become change agents, and adapt to an ever-evolving digital landscape. We'll also have some actionable insights and provide a glimpse of the future of IT and innovation. All of that on today's episode of Status Go. With that, Nabil, I would love to welcome you to Status Go, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm good. It's good to be here. It's good to be able to diffuse what I learned over the years. And some of this
Well,
may not.
and I have been looking forward to this conversation since we were introduced, probably more than a month ago now in our original conversation, because this concept of how does IT handle all the things thrown at it, depending on where they are in the organization and where their organization is, has been something that has been fascinating to me throughout my career. Before we dive in, can you share a little bit about your background, your career journey?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. So I've been in IT and IT services since probably 35, 36 years, right? And you know, I've seen a lot. And what you mentioned about Gardner, the picture comes to mind of a turtle and a rabbit. And for them, bimodal IT was a turtle and a rabbit in that article I think you're talking about. And through my experience, I witnessed that speed is not the only concern. So turtle rabbit is the approach rate of speed, and it's not the only concern for sure.
Yeah.
And so ambidexterity has to be in many other angles, like you mentioned. So I learned through going from a service provider to a consumer at the side of enterprise IT, back to a vendor supplier for the
Mhm.
service provider, that service is consumed by enterprise IT, to keep turning from financials services to IT services, and to healthcare services. The problem is the same
Yeah.
at the macro level. So here today, I'm happy to share what I feel and know from my studies what we could do.
Well, and in your paper, you talk about a couple of different case studies that underpin, sorry, not undermine, underpin your theories about this. Uh, so one of the things that we talked about when we first were introduced, Nabil, is your experience in going back to your home country. You're from Lebanon,
Yes,
and you served as a part of the Red Cross,
yes.
but you had a technology bent to us. Could you share a little bit about what work you were doing and some of how that led you further into this work about IT organization?
Yeah, so the work was that I did was before the Red Cross. As time passed, then of course there is a calling to say how can I contribute more to this world. So I said the Red Cross. I saw through an encounter with a friend of mine, I saw there is a need to digitalize the Red Cross in the MENA region in the Middle East, North Africa. So I joined the Red Cross there as a part volunteer, part consultant, as the acting CTO for them and CTO CIO. So first, I looked at all the operational work they're doing, and it's not, nothing is documented in a digital fashion. Everything is on paper. Paper reporting was hard, and the ability to prove the merit of the mission was also camouflaged behind all this stack of papers. So I spent with the directors there. I spent about a month or two trying to build a strategy. We came up with a 10-year strategy for digitalization. So 2 5-year steps that would take it from all paper to completely digital, from the digital telephony to digital geographic information systems integrated with traceability and blood bank and psychosocial and first responders. So the key feature in the Red Cross in that area is that they're the first response so responder. They're not
Mhm.
they're the 911 of that country in Lebanon. So that put me in a place where I can make a big difference. So we can talk about that in detail if needed, but basically it was a good journey with very motivated
Yeah.
humanitarians that I was able to make a mark in this world with.
We love as technologists to tie our work to something bigger than ourselves, right? And I love that story that you were able to uh, marry your passion for technology with your passion for giving back and part of humanitarian plus supporting your home country. I think that is fabulous. Well, let's dive into this concept of bimodal IT. Could you start by explaining the concept of bimodal and how it addresses the challenges that we're all facing in this rapid change of the digital era?
Yeah. So what I would like to start with is the context where my paper was based on, and then we
Yeah,
can extrapolate from that.
yeah,
The context of the paper was IT services companies per se. The reason of that choice was that IT services companies use IT for their own business model and also preach and maintain and install and implement and sell IT for their customers.
yeah.
So the resources are scarce in these companies in general, and they're multitasked,
Mhm.
hence, sometimes bimodal.
Yeah.
So they're going to look at the internal, how they drive the internal growth of the company, and how they go and learn from what their audience or their customers want so they can align the business model to serve them. So my choice of that was those two companies that I compared, and I kind of developed the idea through that use case. Was one company had to get to offer cloud services,
Hmm.
but they knew nothing about cloud.
Yeah.
The other company wanted to transform from a probably analog telephony company to a
Uh-huh.
digital click once you get DSL at your home kind of company.
Yeah.
So the two are different perspectives. One is I get to learn cloud to deploy cloud and support cloud, which is supposed to be 7 by 24 initiative. Then the second one was I got to go compete with who's out there and gain market share. So I got to implement the whole infrastructure first. So I got to have this thinking of I'm implementing for my use, my management, at the same time for the best case scenario for the customer.
Yeah.
These are all conundrums that IT services companies go through. Now, I do want to mention something though. It is not a unique situation. Hospitals, banks
Mhm.
go through the same thing because nowadays we consume IT and we sell an IT service. Everybody
Yeah.
does that,
Yeah.
including a
Even if we
surgeon.
don't tell, even if we don't call it an IT
Yeah,
service, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Even in the surgical room, the operating room, they consume the IT services with all the digitalization, and they apply sometimes install a defibrillator or a pacemaker inside somebody's chest. That's another technology too, right? So I'm being a
Oh,
little out of context here, but to
oh yeah.
show that
Well,
there is always bimodality there.
well, and I think that's important because our listeners, we have uh, uh, many listeners that come from IT services companies. Intervision, who sponsors and publishes this podcast, is an IT services company. But we also have listeners that are in healthcare or in higher education or in some other industry that is not tech per se, right? But as you say and say so well, um, they probably have a tech element to the product or service that they sell. And so I think this has gotten more and more urgent for IT departments, IT services companies to be able to handle this bimodal, this ambidextrousness that you talk about in your paper of how do you balance stability and keeping things up and operational with learning the new things and innovation and driving the customer needs? So when you think about it, we've been talking about IT alignment with the business for, gosh, probably 50 years, Nabil. We've been talking about it. How does this bimodal IT concept reframe those traditional principles of alignment? What things do our listeners need to be thinking about?
Thank you, Jeff. Very, very well framed. Because exactly, when you talk about the dynamics of IT organizations today and compare it to what IT organizations used to be in the past, definitely there is a 180-degree shift.
Yeah,
IT organizations in the past were supposed to keep the lights on, like you were saying,
yeah,
make sure things are happening and working, and doesn't matter what anybody's asking because the service has nothing to do with technology in the old days.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so talk about mortgage, talk about bank account, everything was on paper. So really, the old days was just fix the machine.
yeah,
Yeah. Today, you look at the IT organization to one, drive the business innovation layers of the company. Okay, so how from customer support, which is after the fact, to lead generation before we get the customer on board. All of it has to do with how technology sells itself. That's one side. The other side, you got to turn around and say, oh my gosh, I got to go 7 by 24
Yeah.
because I got to run that engine that keeps things going.
Yeah.
So, so that's today the bimodality of that organization. We call it organizational dynamics. In the paper, I refer to it as capabilities of exploration and capabilities of exploitation.
Uh,
So, exploitation means I have something, I want to make it work for me.
yeah.
Meaning, I do buy a certain cloud service from Asia, let's just say. I want to make sure I exploit it right for my business.
Hmm.
But then I might sell a certain software at some point that I want to make sure I explore all the options that software and product development cycles and all that need to be in that software to make sure I am innovative enough to compete.
Yeah.
So one keeps the lights on still, right? We did not leave that behind. And the
Right.
other one, though, brings the gas to light the fire of the company. So, yeah.
No, I love how you talk about that, the exploration versus the exploitation. I think that's a great um, way to keep this in mind as we're talking about this. In your paper, you mentioned the two companies that you explore in your case studies. What were some of the key takeaways that you saw in those organizations that helped them be successful? Either you mentioned one was, hey, we're providing these IT services. We're traditionally on prem, and now we need to learn cloud so that we can offer that service. And the other one was phone systems. How were they able to create this environment of ambidexterity within their organization?
Um, Thank you. This is a good question because the contrast between them, I got to make sure I lay the foundation there because there is a
Yeah.
contrast, even though both are IT services companies. The first company you mentioned with the hosting and cloud had to learn how to be the consumer and the provider of the same service. The second company had to be to learn digitalization and digital technology to provide a digital service. Different situation. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the digital service was totally different from a consumer perspective than what they expected to deploy in the back closet.
Yeah.
Technologies are different. While in the first company, they had a clear expectation of how a user
Hmm.
should be challenged or step up to learn. So the two are kind of complementary
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah.
That's why I chose them. And they have to do with how you make sure you are able to learn and apply a certain technology ambidextrally, okay,
Mhm.
from outside looking in and from inside looking out.
Yeah.
And also, how do you manage to learn one technology, deploy it for the customer who's consuming a different set of technology that needs that first technology to work?
Yeah.
This duality of thinking is what maybe technicians could be learning to be a little bit ambidextrous, but managers and above, organizational leaders, gotta master the ambidexterity because they cannot lose sight of one side, which is the external side, from the internal side. So you got ambidextrous in technology, sweet. Ambidextrous in customer, who's the customer? Is the business the customer or is the business customer the customer, meaning the external audience? And is the technology up to par to make sure that we don't mix them up in their conditions? For example, let me clarify. I can always imagine a two by two. In
Hmm.
every company, you cannot just have one CTO, one CIO, one CDO, and whatever. And in the past, if we remember, in financial industry, they used to hide the CIO under IS umbrella under the CFO.
Yeah.
And in some technology industries today, they hide the CIO under the CTO or vice versa. That is not a recommended practice. From my paper, I explain why. We need to think in this two by two. So the four quadrants have a CIO role,
Hmm.
a CTO role, a CDO role, right? Digital, and
Hmm.
then the data science.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Each one has a different thinking. Each role has a different way to think. The weight of ambidexterity is different from role to role. And that's why now we have to develop these organizations in that way. I know it's hard for some of us because we are in startups, small organizations, we have to play those different roles at different times.
Yeah. Sometimes there's one person that does all four, right?
Yes, yes. So that emphasizes how ambidextrous we have to be. So just to highlight a little bit more detail on this. So I see the CIO keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Okay, make sure that I use information and I use all the informatics and the components of IT to run the business. So and that the interesting thing is that you can take someone who IT in a hospital or CIO hospital and put them in the banking. They should be the same skills.
Hmm.
Okay, then you take the technology side, what I call it the operating technology. Those are two different fields, and every industry is a different field. The operating
Yeah.
technology in hospitals has to do with patient side devices. They have to do with operating room devices, how to integrate those, different uptimes, different resiliency, different quality. When you go to banking, you have the back end, the banking back end, ATMs, banking IS. So those are specialty now.
Yeah.
So if you are one person doing the two jobs, now you got to be ambidextrous.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Then you go to what I call them the other two quadrants, or I call them the lower layer, right? Is the data
Hmm.
management. Now data is needed for all the others.
Right. Right.
What data is protected data? What data I can use? What data is not useful in this context, that context? Again, ambidexterity.
Yeah.
Then you go to the digital. We use the digital systems in the company and we have some facing the customer. What is that boundary?
Yeah.
The person managing the digital world has to understand the boundary working with the operating technology and the information technology arms. So that ambidexterity is no longer two, is multifaceted.
Multifaceted. Yeah. And if you are in a larger organization where those are four different individuals, those four, they have to be attached at the hip, right? Because they are all so interrelated.
Yeah. And in larger companies, there's all C level. In general, they are peers who may be set up to compete by some management styles
Yeah. Yeah.
or collaborate depending on the situation is. Or they might have different customers out there that they take care of, right? So keeping in mind that capabilities of exploitation are important, so are capabilities of exploration.
Yeah.
And exploitation, example will be I know the technology, I am up to speed on training, I am aware of what the customer wants, I'm aware of how to keep skilling myself and my organization to take care of that. But then the exploration is I want to make sure I add value from an external extra. For example, if I'm doing now maybe identity management in a certain internal context and I want to add some identity management features into my product to compete, I have to go out there, explore what's out there, and add the value into the company. So these two capabilities are also ambidextrous.
Yeah, yeah, because you have varying priorities within each one of those areas. What are some things organizationally? You talked about organizational dynamics a little bit ago. What are some enablement practices that technology organizations can adopt to embrace this innovation based on IT?
I don't think anybody can succeed without collaboration and at all these four levels. Okay. And a mutual understanding of the challenges at each level and the value of each level. So this C level, imagine if this C level quadrant is the multiple people. You gotta always understand what makes the other one or the other organization successful, and then interact with it.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's a complex scenario. And if you are one person handling the four, then you're lucky that you don't have to collaborate or be aware, but then you're encumbered with the priorities, as you said.
yeah, yeah,
So managing priorities and communication, that's agility by definition.
yeah, yeah.
What's important, why is it important, when is it important, and then you can keep triaging.
Yeah, Nabil, you talk about agility, and what strikes me is that organizations need agile with a capital A, the agile methodology, but also the soft skill of being agile and the ability to pivot from one priority to another. Does that do both of those play into what you're talking about here with being ambidextrous?
Well, yes, yes, in some way. So let me give you an example. For instance, let's say we're launching a product, and the product owner is developing some features of the product, and the product owner is sheltered from the customer conversation with sales. You might end up with something different than what the sales needs. So for me, agility requires, or best practice there, when you have the ambidexterity in there, the product owner who is not necessarily customer facing or not in the habit of being customer facing will also join sales in presentations.
Ah,
So simple moves like that, where the sales team is not blocking them off, say these guys are backroom guys and I don't want to talk to them, and let them do whatever they need to do best, and then the client will be ashamed. No, bring them forward and ask the client to bring one of their backroom people forward. So
yeah,
now you'll have a handshake at a different level than the sales environment. The technical people love to work together. And then you have a success of this ambidextrous call, even. So the call has become, I'm not selling anymore. I am now implementing before I even sell. That's one way of creating this. One, the product owner now is familiar with the feature requirements are. So
yeah,
you improve the exploration capability. And then the salesperson now is familiar with what the technicians are talking about.
yeah,
Now, the salesperson's exploitation capabilities improved. These are the dynamic capabilities back and forth that are exchanged inside the company that will improve the overall agility, because now the salesperson at the next call is much more improved, and
yes,
the product owner on the next project is much more improved. And it keeps going where the tie between them is learning.
yeah. Learning
So
from each other.
yes, and from the customer. And
Yeah,
then if both of them are, if the technical side and the sales side are in a conversation with customer service, for example, which is the third potentially component in every company, They're going to say, oh, customer service, come on over. Let's onboard you to what the experience is. And the three of them now become agile in serving the customer and learning from each other.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you brought in customer service, customer support into this as well, because that could be from an IT practitioner perspective, that could be supporting the other associates in the business, but it also could have an element of supporting the external customer and understanding the needs of the external customer and bringing that into your mindset as well. Um, so I know, Nabil, we're running out of time here, and I know we've barely scratched the surface on your paper. Is there another point that you're really wanting to let our listeners know about this concept before we kind of wrap things up?
Well, one key contributor to all this picture is making sure we know the customer and who is the customer and what the customer wants. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's harder done than said.
Yes.
Uh, what I see is I would recommend that everybody out there, when you have a challenge, have the technicians listen to the customer calls, have the salesman listen to customer calls, because that's where everything has to materialize after at the end. And we do shadowing programs here, and I sponsored that at all levels to make sure we import all the customer view and the experience and wrap it up with the like a tech talk.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
internally, customer service teams, technology teams, and sales teams are now looking at each other to learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Then you have the same with the other four quadrants I talked about, where they also have tech talks, learn from each other. See, learning is a dynamic capability. So that's the underlayment of everything. If we don't know how to learn from each other, we're not agile, we're not nimble, we're not ambidextrous.
Yeah.
So,
I love that kind of summarizes it, learning from each other and understanding the challenges each other has, whether you're one of the four quadrants, whether you're outside the four quadrants, or whether you're the customer, being able to understand those challenges. Well, Nabil, I warned you that Status Go, we're all about action. So,
yes.
what are one or two things that our listeners should go do tomorrow because they listened to our conversation today?
Okay. Start shadowing the customer, and everybody's everybody's customer, right? So, internally, you can define the customer and shadow them, shadow their calls. Start learning from each other's. I don't think silos work, and it never worked. Make sure every mission has a plan, and be accepting to do different missions at the same time. So that's the ambidexterity. And organizational learning is primordial. So tech talks, huddles are all important for maturity in the organization.
I'm a huge proponent of shadowing. We used to do those when I was in the CIO role. We called them ride-alongs because we were a very distributed organization. We were in a retail setting, so we would do ride-alongs to go visit the retail stores and see that. Nabil, thank you so much for being on Status Go. I really appreciate it. I loved the paper, and of course, we will provide a link in our show notes to that paper. But thank you for being on the program today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff, for the opportunity. And for everybody out there, we're in it together. So thank you.
That's right. We are in it together, learning from each other.
Yes.
To our listeners, if you happen to have a question or want to learn more, visit intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. And as I mentioned, we will link to Nabil's white paper that is available online. This is Jeff Tunn for Nabil Badr. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jeff.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.